Hello, and welcome to today's webinar titled SOLIDWORKS PDM Vault Maintenance, Good Oversight. My name is Mark Sheets, and I'm glad you can join us. This webinar will be most useful for those of you who are already managing a PDM vault and want to make sure you're following recommended procedures for backups, updates, and scheduled maintenance. And for those of you who will soon be implementing SOLIDWORKS PDM. Let's begin by digging into the title a little bit, and then we'll review the agenda. The subtitle to this webinar, Good Oversight, actually carries two definitions for the word oversight. Number one, an unintentional failure to notice or do something. This is not a place where we really want to be with SOLIDWORKS PDM. Worst case scenario, you have a catastrophic crash on the server and you can't recover the data. We want to make sure that we're following proper backup procedures. But then you'll notice there's lots of other things we're going to cover in this webinar once I get to the agenda. The other definition is the action of overseeing something. And I think this is where we want to be. So let's cover what we're going to talk about today. We're going to start out with vault maintenance and then talk about doing updates, reducing your risk, downtime, and costs related to your annual updates. And then maintenance. A lot of customers don't even know that there's a few things you can continually do within PDM to optimize performance. And I will end up with talking about how GoEngineer can help you. Before we begin into those specific topics, I do want to quickly cover just basic PDM terminology. A lot of you, especially if you're a user, know that you have a PDM vault and you do check in, you check out, you push documents through workflows and transitions and get your work done. But there's really several components to a PDM vault. The main ones are the SQL Server database and the archive server. So the database contains all the information about the files, and the archive server is where the files are actually stored. Together, these constitute what we typically call the PDM vault. The next component is the SOLIDWORKS License Manager. All PDM licenses will float, even if you're not floating your SOLIDWORKS PDM, your SOLIDWORKS licenses. All components can reside on a single Windows server, or for some performance gains, you can actually split this up and put the SQL server on one physical or virtual server, and then the archive server on another. The network license manager can actually be on either one of them. It doesn't make that much difference. I've already mentioned that the servers can be physical or virtual servers, and you might be using a cloud-based server, Amazon Web Services, Azure, or GoEngineer hosted environments. There are a couple of more components to the PDM, let's say vault and server environment, that we just want to cover quickly, just so we're clear on all the terminology. You might also have replicated archive servers at remote sites, or a replicated SQL database. Again, these will gain performance for those who have to operate in operations with sites around the world. And then there's also the web server component with PDM Pro. In fact, the web server component, database replication, and replicated archives are all components of PDM Professional and are not part of PDM Standard. And finally, we have the PDM client side. And there are actually three different types of clients. Your CAD editor that you would use with any of your CAD tools, specifically SOLIDWORKS, the contributor for non-CAD users who want to take advantage of check-in, check-out, and everything else you can do in the vault, and then viewer-specific licenses. Okay, now let's talk about PDM Vault Backup. Now that we know what components are on the server, there are some very specific ways that you want to do your backups. So we're going to cover where your backup should be stored, when you should be doing backups, what needs to be backed up, and how you can do that. And then I'll show a live demonstration of the procedures outlined in the SOLIDWORKS PDM installation guide. First, let's talk about where your files should be backed up. We highly recommend that even if you initially do your backups on the same server or within your building, you have some procedure where your data gets stored offsite. If you should have a catastrophic fire in your building or something like that, you really want to be assured that your data does sit somewhere else in another location. There's a lot of ways to do this with cloud-based servers or mirroring the backups off to another location. So how often should you do backups? Well, I like to sort of answer that with another question. How many days of work are you willing to use? So without saying it, I probably don't have to mention that. I highly recommend that you do a daily backup. From here on out, everything I'm going to talk about with backups is documented in the installation guide for SOLIDWORKS PDM, Chapter 10, at least as of the 2020 release of SOLIDWORKS and PDM. You can find this installation guide if you look in your SOLIDWORKS installation file path, and then you'll look for these following folders: SOLIDWORKS PDM, Lang, GB, and then you'll see the installation guide PDF file. Okay, the specific things that need to be backed up. Remember, your Vault consists of both the SQL Server and the archive server. And there are some specific procedures for backing up each one of these. From your SQL Server databases, there's two databases that need to be backed up. The one called Kinesis Master DB, and then one that will just pretty much carry the title of your Vault. And it typically is prefixed with swpdm underscore your Vault name. Next, you want to back up your archive server files, and that will be the largest component of your backup because it's the physical files. And then finally, the archive server settings. The tools that I'm going to cover today for backing up the SQL databases are just Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. This ships and installs right alongside Microsoft SQL Server Standard. If you're a user of PDM Standard, you will probably need to download Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio for SQL Express as a separate download. It's free, but I highly encourage you to do so if you don't have any other methods or software for backing up your SQL databases. There really are many other tools you can use, but this is all we're going to cover today, and it is outlined in the SOLIDWORKS installation guide. The next thing we'll show is backing up your archive server. You can really use any backup software. It's just a copy of the physical file system where the archive files are stored. And then we'll need to back up the archive server settings, and we'll use the SOLIDWORKS PDM archive server configuration tool to do that. So I'm going to show how to do a one-time backup of all these components, and then how to do scheduled backups of all these so that it's not something you have to manually do each day. Let's first focus on the SQL database backups. Here we're going to launch Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. We're going to connect to the correct database server, and we're going to enter our SA password or any login that gives you credentials to manage your SQL Server databases. Remember I said we need to back up the Kinesis Master DB. To do that, you right-click, slide down to Task, and click on Backup. Here, we're on the General menu. You can see the database we're going to back up. We're going to do a full backup. That's what we recommend. And then you need to define where the backup goes. We're going to say to a disk. And it may have a path in here. It's probably incorrect where you really want it stored. It's up to you. So I'm going to browse. The browsing environment for this location is a little weird to navigate through, but just bear with it. I'm putting my backups on my D drive, and I have a folder where I keep my backups for various vaults. And then give it a name. I always call it the name of the database and give it the extension .bak. That's going to be the default restore extension if you ever need to restore it. Next, go to Media Options. We're going to overwrite all existing backup sets. Verify backup when finished. And then let's go to Backup Options. In here, we're just going to say, don't compress the backup. The SOLIDWORKS databases are very small. No reason to do that. Clicking OK tells us that it was completed successfully. Next, you want to choose your Vault database. Again, it will contain your Vault name. And it's exactly the same procedure, so we'll run through it a little bit quicker this time. Again, review the General tab. Main thing I want to do here is give it the proper path. And name. Check my media options, override all existing, verify when finished, and don't compress the backup. Click OK. All right. Now let's talk about how we can use SQL Server Management Studio to schedule our backups. Again, there are other tools available to do this, but we're just going to cover the tool that comes with SQL Server. Again, back in SQL Server Management Studio, we want to go to the Management folder here, and we're going to go to Maintenance Plan, right-click, and I like to use the Maintenance Plan wizard. Makes it really easy to set up a scheduled backup. Give it a name. Here I'm going to just use PDM Vault Backup. And I'm going to work on the scheduling of this backup. I want to do a daily backup, define when it starts, the frequency of the backup, and when we're going to start and stop this maintenance plan. No end date for this one. The maintenance wizard can actually schedule all kinds of stuff. Here we're doing full database backup. And then I'm going to choose the database that we want to back up. In this case, it will be Kinesio and my Vault name. Like we did before, we want to define where my backups go. Might need to browse to it. That's about it. Once I'm finished here, it creates the maintenance plan. This is now in effect. Okay, so we've covered backing up your SQL databases. We've also covered scheduling the backup. Now let's talk about backing up the archive server files. This is just a backup of the entire folder structure that contains your archive server, your archive files. This is all the files that are really contained in your server. So to do this, the first thing I want to do is find out, and I'll show you how to find out where your archive server files are located. To do this, we're going to launch into the SOLIDWORKS PDM Archive Server Configuration tool. You'll find it here in your Start menu. Once you're here, just click on Archives, and then you can right-click on the Vault, go to Properties, and here's the path to the archive server files. Now sometimes if the path name is long, the whole path name won't exist there. You'll have to go here to relocate, and then you can see the path. Okay, that just tells us where the files are located. So I'm going to browse into my archive server files, and this is what it looks like. It will be folders numbered 1 through 9 and A through F. All you need to do is, one way or another, make a copy of this entire folder structure to somewhere else, and you have a backup. Here, I'm going to put it into my PDM Vault's backup archive files location. It's just where I prefer to keep it. And finally, the last thing we need to back up are the archive server settings. This is a real quick backup, and it can also be scheduled. We're going to go and again use the PDM Archive Server Configuration tool. This time we're going to go to Tools, Backup Settings, choose a Vault, and here I'm just actually going to go through the scheduling procedure as well. This is going to be recurring every day, and you want this timed at the same time you're backing up your database files and your archive server files. Define your location. Normally, I would probably just have this scheduled. In this case, I'm just going to do a one-time backup. And the backup's made. Okay, that is a complete PDM Vault server backup. By doing a backup like this, I'm actually able to restore this vault, which includes the SQL databases, the archive server settings, and the archive server files onto any server if we need to spin up a new one. I think I mentioned this already, but PDM Standard actually runs on SQL Express. The download of SQL Express does not include Microsoft's SQL Server Management Studio for doing your backups and scheduling your backups. You can download it, so there is a separate download for this. It's free, and I recommend that if you don't have any other way to back up your SQL Express database for PDM Standard, that you download this. The only thing that you're going to be challenged with, in addition to just SQL Server Management Studio for SQL Express, is that it doesn't include SQL Server Agent for scheduling those backups. We have a white paper on our website that will explain then how to do automatic SQL Server backups when you don't have SQL Server Agent. If you want that document, just go to our website, go to the search tool, and search under SOLIDWORKS PDM Standard Automatic SQL Backup. Now that we're done covering the topic of your PDM Vault backup, this is a good time to move on to PDM Vault updates. Prior to doing a PDM Vault update, you always want to back it up. So now you know how. PDM Vault updates are relatively straightforward. What's a little more challenging is just coming up with a good procedure for scheduling and a good checklist for doing your PDM Vault update. It does involve not only your PDM Vault update, but you're going to have to figure out how to update your SOLIDWORKS and PDM clients as well. Everything I'm talking about here is documented in the installation guide, SOLIDWORKS PDM, Chapter 11. So before I go into how you do the update and running through an example, I think it's really important that you develop for yourself a checklist. Here's one that I would recommend. This is always a good time to review compatibility. So the things that you want to check for is the compatibility of the SOLIDWORKS release to your server operating system, to the SQL Server version, as well as, if you're on PDM Professional, the replicated archive server operating systems. This can get pretty confusing, and I actually created my own table just to make sure I've got this covered. So for example, if I go down the left column to PDM 2020, I can see across that it's compatible with SQL 2014 R3 through SQL 2017. The operating system version would need to be either Server 2016 or Server 2019. And then we can see the backwards compatibility of SOLIDWORKS versions. Other things I would add to your checklist is I think this is a good time to review your SQL Standard Edition licensing. A lot of you are using the SQL CAL's client access license model. The challenge with that is you need to have a SQL CAL license for every PDM client install. This isn't always an exact match of your PDM licenses because all PDM licenses float. So you might be floating your licenses out to many clients, many more clients than you have SQL CAL licenses for. Those need to match. Otherwise, a Microsoft audit might not go so well for you. The other SQL licensing type is what we call a server core license. This is a license of SQL that is really just licensed to the number of cores you're utilizing on your server. That needs to be a match, so that's a quick review, but it's not tied to client access licensing at all. For those of you on PDM Standard, not Professional, PDM Standard runs on SQL Express, it's free, and requires no additional licensing, so this isn't something you need to be concerned with. Next on your checklist, I kind of put this under the category of plan and prepare. Schedule your user downtime, give them, I would say, not only plenty of notifications, but probably somewhat frequent notifications, so they don't say, I didn't know I was going to be down. Make sure you have a good recovery strategy if issues arise during your upgrade. The upgrade is going to require you to have administrative access to your SQL database, so make sure you test your login. Typically, you want to make sure you have the password to the SA account in SQL Server Management Studio. Download the installation files for your PDM server. I actually recommend that you download those installation files onto the server so that the installation is faster, or the upgrade is faster. So let's review the update process. You'll want your clients to do a kind of final check-in, and I highly recommend that they log out. Make sure you've done a complete backup of your server components. Remember, that's 4 things: the 2 SQL databases, the archive files, and the archive settings. And number 3 here, these are absolutely required. I typically do these in this order. I would upgrade the license manager first, do your SOLIDWORKS PDM server upgrade, and then there's sort of almost a hidden step. It is outlined in the installation guide, but you have to also do a database upgrade. If you are taking advantage of PDM add-ins like Convert Scripts, Dispatch, or any custom add-in, you'll probably need to update those as well. And don't forget, for your PDM professional environments, to update the replicated archive servers and the web server. Once that is done, you'll move on to your client deployments. And then something else to consider is using the file version upgrade tool. Your update of your PDM server components will not update the SOLIDWORKS files contained in the vault to the newer version of the SOLIDWORKS files. There is a tool to do that. It can be relatively complicated, but it really contains a lot of very powerful and useful options if you decide to use the file version upgrade tool. We have some really good instructions on our website. If you want to just search on SOLIDWORKS PDM file upgrade tool recommendations, searching on that term will produce this and outline some recommended steps in using that upgrade tool. I'm going to run through a PDM Vault update example, and let's make the assumption that our clients have logged off. We do have a recovery strategy. We've tested, we know the SA password, we've got our installation files downloaded, and we have a good deployment strategy. We're also going to assume we've already updated the S&O manager, but we still have to update the SOLIDWORKS PDM server and update the Vault database. So to do the update, you want to browse to your installation files, wherever you put them, and just launch into the setup that you'll find in there. Next, you will need to click on Install Server Components, and you'll notice here that you should see Upgrade SOLIDWORKS PDM Server, not Install. That means it knows that there is a PDM server on the system. Here you'll need to configure the upgrade. It says it's required. To do that, you click on Change up here. And pay attention to each section here. Here I'm going to do a PDM Professional Vault. I'm updating these features from PDM. I need to identify, if there's multiple SQL servers, which one contains my PDM database. And then provide my SA password. Okay, once we're done with that, we can go ahead and begin the upgrade. You can expect this to take probably around 10 minutes, a little slower than what I was just showing here in the time lapse. And it may require a server restart. So just be aware of that in case you're also running other systems or services on the server that people rely upon. One final step is to upgrade the Vault database. To do this, you'll want to browse into your downloaded installation files again. And then go into the PDM server folder. And there's a folder in there called Upgrade. Scroll to the bottom, and here you'll find the Upgrade installer. This will need to connect to your SQL server that contains your PDM Vault database. You'll need to provide your SA password again. Choose what database you want to upgrade. If you have multiple databases, you will need to choose those. And click Next, and it only takes a few minutes typically. So at this point, we've upgraded all the server components. Now you would move on to upgrading your clients and using your deployment strategy. Moving on to PDM Vault maintenance, there's really 4 different things that we want to cover. 2 of them have to do with the SQL Server: database index maintenance and transition log management, your archive disk space, and your PDM recycle bins. Let's start with the SQL index maintenance. So over a given amount of time and usage of PDM, the table indexes grow quite large and they get fragmented. So this is something that happens also during very large data loads or migration, or an update can cause a lot of fragmentation. Your symptoms of index database index fragmentation is slow browsing, searching, and data card performance. So if at some point you begin to notice that these things are progressively getting slower, and you're thinking, wow, when we first got PDM, it seemed to be quite snappy, and it's not so much anymore, this is something to look at. So what we want to do is what we call reorganize and rebuild the database indexes. If you want, you can look up in the SOLIDWORKS knowledge base under these solutions, S061702 and 042552. What I'm going to show here is actually documented in there. And they also contain SQL queries that will let us know how much fragmentation we have and how to fix the fragmentation. Once you do check the fragmentation, if it's over 30%, you should run through a reorganize and the database indexes. So let's go through an example. Here I'm in SQL Server Management Studio. I'm going to go ahead and open the SQL queries that were downloaded from those knowledge-based solutions. The first one, you'll want to replace vault name here with your vault name. And here, we're going to add the term variable value and execute this. This is going to show us our current fragmentation, and we're like at 55, almost 56%. Now we're going to open up the query that will reindex the tables. Again, enter your vault name. We already have variable value here, and then we'll execute. Look for this at the bottom. And then we'll go back to our previous query and execute that again. And that took that down to 0. So that's a one-time check and reindex. You can also set up a maintenance plan in SQL to rebuild and reorganize. Again, back in SQL Server Management Studio, go to Management, right-click on Maintenance Plans, and you can use the Maintenance Plan Wizard, similar to what we did for the backups. Give this a name that makes sense. Schedule it, and unlike daily backups, I do this monthly. I'm going to choose to rebuild the index. select my database. Here it's going to be my Vault database. That's the one that will grow, that could grow quite large. And rebuild index offline in this case. And now I've got a maintenance plan to do that for me. For using PDM Standard, again, SQL Server Agent isn't included to include the maintenance plan. So here we've developed another white paper to show you how you can do this without SQL Server Agent. Next thing that can cause slow performance in PDM, and it's related to the SQL database operation, is the transition log. So the SQL transition log is something that's absolutely necessary for SQL to continue to operate and to recover SQL databases. Since we recommend doing full SQL database backups, we don't really need a transition log for full recover of the transition log. We can actually use the simple recovery model, and that will greatly reduce the size of that transition log, which again, over time, can get huge and affect performance of SQL. We actually do have this well documented in a document that you can search for on our website. Just look for this, SOLIDWORKS PDM change SQL from full recovery to simple recovery model. The next thing you're going to want to pay attention to is your archive server's disk space. This is just something you need to keep an eye on. We highly recommend that you don't let this get over 80%. You're starting to get into just 20% of free disk space left zone, and you really don't want to let that go until it's full. There's not much to show here, just watch for it. When any file is deleted in PDM, it doesn't actually delete it, it moves it into the PDM recycle bins. This can be cause of unnecessary disk space usage. So if you find that your archive disk space is getting to the limit, here's one quick area you might be able to go to and free up some additional space. I'll show you how to do this. If you browse to a vault or any folder within the vault, here I'm just going to go to the root of the vault, click on Properties, go to the tab, Deleted Items, and here I'm going to say Include Items in Subfolders, and this shows me all the files that users have deleted. I can sort on these if I want to get a better idea of where they're located, so any of the columns can be sorted on. Here are your options for recovering the files, if you needed to do that as an administrator, or destroy. And destroy implies, yeah, we're getting rid of them forever. So now that we've covered these topics of backups, updates, and maintenance, well, how else can we help you? Some of you already know and have used our services for getting you started with PDM. We've also done some configuration modifications for you. Annually, sometimes you're asking us to go and do your Vault updates or Vault server moves. We also, of course, provide all kinds of training with PDM, as well as additional functions when you need it. So we can do customizations to the API dispatch. These are pretty well-known services that we do. There's a few other ways that we can help you as well. If managing and administering your PDM Vault is something you really just don't want to do, you don't have time to do it, you have engineers who are doing engineering and nobody is really assigned to be the Vault administrator, we can do that for you. We do have managed administrative services where we can take care of the entire workload of managing your Vault. And here is kind of a bullet list of the things that we do. You'll basically get assigned a personal GoEngineer PDM administrator, so this person becomes your administrator. This is a person who would typically do a lot of administrative stuff. If something needs troubleshooting or fix something in the Vault, this person can also provide you with priority PDM support. You'll know the one person to go to who really knows and is more intimate with your Vault setup. Part of an administrator is doing updates to workflows when you need to change something, processes, changing permissions. Lots of the stuff that we covered in this webinar, updates and backups, this person would also take care of that as well. So in addition to that, a lot of you are already looking for or have already moved your Vault onto cloud-based services. Amazon Web Services or Azure are very popular. We are also now doing hosted services. And in fact, this isn't really new to us. We've been hosting PLM tools for a long time now, so we've got a lot of experience here. New to us is actually providing hosted services for SOLIDWORKS PDM, SOLIDWORKS Manage, Electrical, and SOLIDWORKS Sell. And then finally, just stay tuned for GoEngineer educational events like this one. We have typically several webinars every week. You can go to our website, look at the calendar, see what's coming up, see what might be useful for you. We have an extensive YouTube channel. We have online training. We also have, online training takes place in two forms. One is self-paced training. So we've got training courses for all the basic stuff in SOLIDWORKS. That's pre-recorded, so you can walk through the course at your own pace. What makes us different for that type of self-paced training is you're also given access to set up an appointment with one of our instructors. So if you're stuck on a subject, you want more information, you can schedule time with an instructor. We also offer online live training, and these are very important types of classes because there's not a lot of classroom training going on these days. So if you want instructor-led training, we're still doing that. We're just doing it virtually in, well, let's say a virtual classroom. So stay tuned and stay with us and continue to learn. I hope you have found this webinar useful. Thanks for watching.